Very good morning, students. Today we'll be learning about the ocean deposits. For the majority of the people with an interest in the oceans and oceanography, it's not the allure of the sediments that first grabs their attention. At first glance, the muddy seafloor may not seem that interesting, but the sediments play a vital role in the marine ecosystems and our understanding of the ocean and geological processes. The sediments provide habitat for a multitude of marine organisms, and they contain information about past climates, plate tectonics, ocean circulation patterns, and the timing of major extinctions, just to name a few. In this article, we'll discuss about the introduction to ocean deposits, classification of ocean deposits, and their distribution. The unconsolidated sediments derived from various sources deposited at the sea floors are included in the ocean deposits. The study of ocean or the marine deposits include the consideration of types of sediments, their sources, methods of their transportation, horizontal distribution, lithological successions or vertical variations in distribution and composition, etc. The sediments derived from weathering and erosion of the continental rocks are transported to the oceans by rivers, winds, etc. Volcanic eruptions also provide sediments. Besides, the decay and the decomposition of the marine organisms, both plants and animals, also contribute sediments to the ocean deposits. The term sediment refers to the tiny particles of the rocks and other materials that sink to the ocean floor and eventually settle and accumulate on the bottom. All regions of the sea floor contain some form of sediment, although there are different types of sediments from a variety of sources, and the amount of accumulated sediment can vary greatly from place to place. Globally, ocean sediments average about 1 kilometer thick, but they can exceed 15 kilometer thick in areas of high accumulation. These areas include regions near the mouths of rivers where there is high sediment discharge, and passive margins near the continents where the sea floor has had millions of years for sediment to accumulate. On the other hand, sediments are sparse along divergent plate boundaries where new oceanic crust is being formed, as the crust is too new for the significant accumulation, and in the central oceans that are far away from any significant sediment sources. As time passes over millions of years, these sediments can become lithified or turn into sedimentary rock. It has been estimated that over half of the exposed rock on the continents is sedimentary rock, originally deposited in the ancient oceans and uplifted by the plate tectonics. Many tall mountains, including Mount Everest, are composed of rock formations that contain fossils of marine creatures. These rocks were originally formed as ocean sediments, which were then lithified and pushed upwards during the formation of the process of mountains. Sediment classification. There are a number of ways that we can classify ocean sediments, and some of the most common distinctions are based on the sediment texture, the sediment composition, and the sediment's origin. Texture. Sediment texture can be examined through several variables. The first is the grain size. Sediments are classified by particle size ranging from the finest clays of diameter less than 0.004 millimeters to the largest boulders with diameter more than 256 millimeters. Among other things, grain size represents the conditions under which the sediment was deposited. High energy conditions such as strong currents of waves usually result in the deposition of only the larger particles, as the finer ones will be carried away. Lower energy conditions will allow the smaller particles to settle out and form finer sediments. The figure now displayed on the screen helps us understand the different types of the grain sizes. Sorting is another way to categorize the sediments. Sorting refers to how uniform the particles are in terms of the size. If all of the particles are of such similar size, such as in the beach sand, the sediment is well sorted. If the particles are of very different sizes, the sediment is poorly sorted, such as in the glacial deposits. Well sorted sediments have particles that are all of similar size. Poorly sorted sediments consist of particles of a wide range of sizes. Finally, sediment texture can be described based on its maturity or how long the particles have been transported by the water or other vectors. Maturity can be reflected by the degree of rounding of the particles, the amount of sorting, and the composition of the sediment. In case of the rounding, the more mature the sediment, the rounder the particles, as a result of the particles being abraded over the time. A high degree of sorting indicates maturity because over the time the smaller particles will be washed away and a given amount of energy will move particles of a similar size over the same distance. Lastly, the older and the more mature a sediment, the higher the quartz content, at least in the sediments derived from the rock particles. Quartz is a common mineral in terrestrial rocks and it is very hard and resistant to abrasion. Over time, particles made from other materials are worn away, leaving only quartz behind. Beach sand is a very mature sediment. It is composed primarily of the quartz and the particles are rounded and of similar size. Sources of the sediments. Sediments are also classified based on their source of origin. There are 4 main categories for the origin of the marine sediments. Lithogenous sediments are derived from the pre-existing rock. They are also called the terragenous sediments since most of it comes from the land masses and makes its way into the ocean. Biogenous sediments are composed of the remains of the marine organisms. Hydrogenous sediments are formed when materials that are dissolved in water precipitate out and form solid particles. Cosmogenous sediments are derived from the extraterrestrial sources. Few of the important examples of the sediments are discussed here. Firstly, the biogenous sediments. They come from the remains of living organisms that settle out as sediment when the organisms die. It is the hard parts of the organisms that contribute to the sediments. Things like shells, teeth or skeletal elements these parts are usually mineralized and are more resistant to decomposition than the fleshy soft parts that rapidly deteriorate after death. Macroscopic sediments contain large remains such as skeletons, teeth or shells of larger organisms. This type of sediment is fairly rare over most of the ocean as large organisms don't die in enough of a concentrated abundance to allow these remains to accumulate. One exception is around coral reefs. Here, there is a great abundance of the organisms that leave behind their remains. In particular, the fragments of the stony skeletons of corals that make up a large percentage of the tropical sand. Microscopic sediments consist of the hard parts of the microscopic organisms, particularly their shells or tests. Although very small, these organisms are highly abundant and as they die by the billions, every day their tests sink to the bottom to create biogenous sediments. Sediments composed of microscopic tests are far more abundant than the sediments from the macroscopic particles, and because of their small size, they create fine-grained, mushy sediment layers. If the sediment layer consists of at least 30% of the microscopic biogenous material, it is classified as a biogenous ooze. The remainder of the sediment is often made up of the clay. The primary sources of microscopic biogenous sediments are unicellular algae and protozoans, the single-celled amoeba-like creatures, that secrete tests of either calcium carbonate or silica. Silica tests group form from 2 main groups, the diatoms and the radiolarians. Oolites. Oolites are small rounded grains formed from the concentric layers of precipitation of material around a suspended particle. They are usually composed of calcium carbonate, but they may also form from the phosphates and the other materials. Accumulation of oolites results in oolitic sand, which is found in its greatest abundance in the Bahamas. Manganese nodules. Manganese nodules are rounded lumps of manganese and other metals that form on the sea floor, generally ranging between 3 to 10 centimeters in diameter, although they may sometimes reach up to 30 centimeters. The nodules form in a manner similar to the pearls. There is a central object around which concentric layers are slowly deposited, causing the nodule to grow over time. The composition of the nodules can vary somewhat depending on their location and the conditions of their formation, but they are usually dominated by manganese and iron oxides. They may also contain smaller amounts of other metals such as copper, nickel, cobalt. The precipitation of the manganese nodules is one of the slowest geological processes known. They grow on the order of a few millimeters per million years. For that reason, they only form in areas where there are low rates of lithogenous or biogenous sediment accumulation, because any other sediment deposition would quickly cover the nodules and prevent further nodule growth. Therefore, manganese nodules are usually limited to the areas in the Central Ocean, far from the significant lithogenous or biogenous inputs, where they can sometimes accumulate in large numbers on the seafloor. Because the nodules contain a number of commercially valuable metals, there has been significant interest in mining the nodules over the last several decades, although most of the efforts have thus far remained at the exploratory stage. A number of factors have prevented large-scale extraction of the nodules, including high costs of deep-sea mining operations, political issues of the mining rights, and environmental concerns surrounding the extraction of these non-renewable resources. Classification of the ocean deposits. Ocean deposits are classified on different bases, for example, on the basis of the location, on the basis of depth, and on the basis of the origin of the sediments, etc. On the basis of the location, this classification is based on typical locations of particular marine sediment. Though several scientists have attempted to classify ocean deposits on the basis of their locations, the classifications of Sir John Murray and J.T. Jenkins are widely acclaimed. Classification of Murray. Sir John Murray has classified the ocean deposits into two broad categories: terragenous deposits and the pelagic deposits. Terragenous deposits are found mainly on the continental shelves and slopes, whereas pelagic deposits predominate on the deep sea floor. Terragenous deposits are composed of coarser materials and are derived from the continents through weathering and erosional processes and are transported to the oceans by various agencies. The color may be blue, yellow, grey or red. Pelagic deposits consist of fine materials formed of skeletons and shells made of marine organisms and a few inorganic substances. They are generally blue, grey or red in color. Classification of Jenkins. Jenkins has divided the marine deposits into three groups: deep sea deposits, shallow water deposits and the littoral deposits. The following is further detailed classification of the Jenkins. Pelagic deposits, which contain red clay, radiolarian ooze, diatom ooze, globigerina ooze, petropod ooze. And then the terragenous deposits include blue mud, red mud, green mud, coral mud, volcanic mud, gravel and sand. Now let's come on to the distribution of the ocean deposits. Firstly, the terragenous deposits. Terragenous deposits include gravel, sand, muds, volcanic materials, etc., which are derived through weathering and erosion of the continental rocks by various denudational processes. There is a marked gradation of these sediments when they are deposited in the oceans. The sequence of these materials from the coast towards the sea is gravel, sand, silt, clay and mud. The ocean currents and the waves very often disturb the gradation and sequence of the sediments. Pelagic deposits. Ocean deposits usually consist of unconsolidated sediments which can come from various sources and are deposited at the ocean floor. Thickness of these deposits vary greatly from one ocean to another. Ocean deposits can be differentiated on the basis of their composition, source, method of transit and mode of distribution. The components of the ocean deposits can be transported by the rivers, winds, volcanic eruptions and marine organisms. Both plants and animals can also contribute to the transportation and the deposit of the ocean deposits. According to the characteristics of the ocean depth, ocean deposits can be classified as pelagic deposits and terragenous deposits. While terragenous deposits at mostly the shallow depths can include deposits of mud, sand, gravel and volcanic materials derived from denudation of the continental rocks, the pelagic deposits can consist of organic material in the form of marine plants and animals as well as inorganic material. Pelagic deposits can cover about 75.5% of the ocean areas in the form of many types of oozes in the sporadic mix in most cases with other types of ocean deposits. Of the total ocean deposits, red clay covers 31.1% of the ocean floor. Pelagic zone consists 4 major zones classified according to the depth: epipelagic zone, mesopelagic zone, bathypelagic zone and a bisopelagic zone. As other than volcanic ash, little terragenous substances are transported into the ocean depths, most of the ocean floor is overlaid by pelagic deposits. Pelagic deposits can consist of both organic and inorganic material, and the organic material can frequently occur as the ooze, which is a sort of liquid mud made up largely of the remains of various marine organisms. When the organic substance is largely made up of calcium carbonate, the ooze is said to be calcareous. The calcareous ooze can further classified into globigerina ooze or the petropod ooze. The majority of the ocean floors in the Atlantic and the Indian Oceans have pelagic deposits that are made up of calcareous oozes. Ooze can also occur as siliceous ooze, which again can be classified into radiolarian ooze and diatom ooze. The siliceous ooze is present in the southern regions of the Atlantic and the Indian Oceans. In 1874, Thomson published a preliminary report on the nature of pelagic deposits, followed by a description by Murray in 1876. This succeeded an expedition by HMS Challenger in 1872 that carried out pioneer studies of the ocean deposits. These studies established the existence of red clays, globigerina, petropod, radiolarian and diatom oozes on the ocean floor. This was followed by the publication of many papers investigating the nature of deep ocean deposits. More studies in this period were interested in paleontological observations in analyzing ocean deposits. Many comparisons were made between pelagic deposits on the ocean floor and soils in the terrestrial locations, which asserted that sediments were not necessarily located at great depths and oceanic and deep ocean deposits could even be found in the environments close to the shoreline. Murray's observations were popular mainly among the Anglo-American geological diaspora, and many European scientists contributed to pursue the presence of oceanic deposits in ancient mountain chains. Since 1968, with the observations of the Glomar Challenger, a new world of findings opened for geology. The results from their observations conclusively pointed towards a spreading ocean, drifting and colliding continents, etc., such that there were good possibility that ocean deposits could be found within the mountain soil. Mountainous regions indeed were sites of two colliding continents, making them logical sites for the pre-oceanic deposits. However, studies so far have revealed that pelagic deposits are largely confined to the ocean basins, with fresh pelagic deposits no replica of the distant past. Although investigations of the oceanic pelagic deposits of earlier periods can reveal a great deal about biodiversity in the previous eras, not much is known in the totality of the complete deep ocean biodiversity. Scientific knowledge of both pelagic and benthic biodiversity is not complete, and a great deal is still left to be known. In the past, studies have been carried out of the deep ocean biodiversity. For example, in the Atlantic Ocean, the Arabian Sea and the parts of the Pacific, but these studies have been carried out on a spatially and temporally limited basis on a limited population. The deep ocean floor can exhibit a great variance of topographical characteristics such as submarine canyons, continental slopes, bythal or basin plains, and base of slope deposits, with a wide occurrence of pelagic deposits that have been mapped. Many features as well can dominate the landscape, such as volcanic activity, hypersaline bases, gas releases, underwater landslides, etc. Some parts of the interlinked ocean can be more saline than the other parts. A wide range of deep ocean habitats are possible in these regions. Deep ocean currents and habitats are however not fully documented. Many phenomena can contribute to the biodiversity of the ocean floor, such as high oxygen concentrations across the water column down to the ocean floor in winter in the Mediterranean Sea, which is not present in late spring and summer, with the seasonal thermocline being 20 to 50 meters deep. Knowing about deep ocean biodiversity is especially important as we engage in deep ocean activities such as deep ocean drilling and resource extraction from the ocean depths. A number of endemic species might form habitats in these regions, whose behavior and movement in the deep ocean habitats is not fully studied and monitored. studies of the pelagic deposits might be of great help in this regard to aid the studies of anthropogenic activities and the composition of residue at the deep ocean floor. Many benthopelagic species exist, such as certain species of shrimp whose activities have not fully been documented. Studies on prokaryotic life in the deep ocean habitats is even more limited and necessary, as they can act as primary producers in these deep ocean habitats. Pelagic deposits, especially the organic oozes, can act as suitable habitats for a range of biodiversity to occur, and a fuller study of these habitats can greatly assist both the science and the human understanding of the effects of anthropogenic activities in the deep ocean. Terrigenous deposits are classified into three categories on the basis of the location and depth. Littoral deposits are generally found on the continental shelves, mainly near the coastal margins, up to the depth of 100 fathoms, but they have also been traced up to the depth of 1000 to 2000 meters. Littoral deposits consist of the gravels, sands, silts, clays and muds. Shallow water deposits include terrigenous sediments deposited between low tide water and 100 fathom depth. These deposits consist of gravel, sand, silt and clays of varying proportions. Sea waves and tidal waves help in the gradation and sorting of sediments, but landslides, slumping, strong storm waves and storms sometimes disturb the vertical stratification of the sediments. Deep water deposits include the sediments deposited below the depth of 100 fathoms. There is marked gradation of sediments in vertical succession, where the sequence of the sediments with increasing depths is blue mud, red mud, green mud, coral mud and the volcanic mud. Pelagic deposits consisting of remains of marine plants and animals in the form of different types of oozes cover about 75.5% of the ocean areas. Petropod, diatom and radiolarian oozes cover 0.4, 6.4, 3.4% of areas of all the oceanic deposits respectively. Red clay constitutes 31.1% of the total ocean deposits. Petropod oozes are found over an area of 12,90,000 kilometers. Globigerina oozes cover larger areas in the Pacific, 64.5 million kilometers square. The Atlantic Ocean has 37.9 million kilometers square and the Indian Ocean 31.4 million kilometers square. Radiolarian oozes are found over an area of 5.16 million square kilometers in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Diatom oozes are spread over an area of 1,03,000 kilometers square in the northern Pacific and 27.6 million square in the southern oceans. Red clay is distributed over an area of 129 kilometers square of all the oceans. Ocean sediments are particles and fragments of dirt, dust and other debris that have settled out of the water and accumulated on the ocean floor. The crucial importance of the marine sediments is that they reveal much about the Earth's history. Marine sediments provide clues to the past climates, movement of the ocean floor, ocean circulation patterns and nutrient supplies for marine organisms. Marine sediments can also be helpful in ascertaining the timing of major extinctions, global climate